Carla Barnes grabbed that little girl by the throat, slammed her against the seat, and screamed into her 9-year-old face, while 300 people sat frozen in their seats and did absolutely nothing. No warning, no reason, just a grown woman in a uniform putting her hands on a child like she had every right in the world to do it. And when Aaliyah tried to pull away, Carla shoved her so violently into that armrest that the crack of breaking bone cut through the entire cabin like a gunshot. Blood poured down that baby's face, and the plane was still in the air. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind that feels ordinary right up until it doesn't. Gate 47 at John F. Kennedy International Airport was loud, crowded, and buzzing with a particular energy of people who had places to be and no patience left to get there. Families dragged rolling suitcases. Business travelers stared at laptops with the hollow focus of people running on 3 hours of sleep and 2 cups of overpriced coffee. Kids pressed their faces against the wide terminal windows, watching the planes glide across the tarmac like enormous steel birds waiting to be set free. And in the middle of all of it stood Jasmine Miller, 34 years old, a middle school science teacher from Brooklyn, trying to manage a rolling carry-on, a tote bag that weighed approximately the same as a small boulder, and the irrepressible, bouncing excitement of her daughter, Aaliyah. Aaliyah was 9 years old. She had her mother's eyes, deep brown and full of light, and her grandmother's laugh, the kind that started in the belly and climbed all the way up before it escaped. She was wearing a purple hoodie with the word Explorer printed across the chest in gold letters, a gift from her science class teacher, who happened to be her mother, for getting the highest score on the state science exam 3 years running. She had her backpack strapped tight on both shoulders, filled with the things a 9-year-old considers essential for a cross-country flight. A library book about deep-sea creatures, a small sketchbook, a pack of colored pencils, a bag of flamin' hot Cheetos that her mother had already told her twice she was not opening on the plane, and her most prized possession, a pair of over-ear headphones her father had given her before he was deployed 18 months ago. She had never been to Los Angeles. She had never been on a plane. She had been talking about this trip for 4 months. "Mama," Aaliyah said, tugging Jasmine's sleeve as they moved toward the gate, "do you think we'll see clouds up close? Like, will we go through them?" Jasmine smiled despite her exhaustion. "Yeah, baby, we'll go right through them." "What do they feel like?" "Like nothing, actually. Like fog." Aaliyah seemed to consider this with the seriousness of a scientist being handed new data. "That's kind of disappointing." Jasmine laughed and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Welcome to the first of many disappointing truths about the world." "That's not funny, Mama." "It's a little funny." They were flying Transnational Airlines, one of the larger domestic carriers, on a full flight with a scheduled departure of 9:15 in the morning. Jasmine had saved for 8 months to afford these tickets. She had booked them as a birthday surprise for Aaliyah and as a way to visit her own sister, Denise, who had moved to Inglewood 2 years earlier and kept sending texts that said, "Just come already." The seats were in economy, middle of the cabin, row 22. Not the worst seats, not the best. But they were hers, paid for and confirmed, and Jasmine had triple-checked the booking because that was who she was. A woman who triple-checked things because she knew, from experience, that the world did not always give Black women the benefit of the doubt. She thought about that as they boarded. She always thought about it in spaces like this. Airports, fancy restaurants, hotels where the front desk clerk looked twice before handing over the key. She carried a low-level awareness with her everywhere she went. Not paranoia, just the particular kind of vigilance that comes from living in a skin the world has decided to be suspicious of. She called it background noise. She had learned to keep it low. Today, she told herself, was a good day. Her daughter was vibrating with joy. That was enough. They found their seats. Aaliyah took the window, Jasmine took the middle. The aisle seat was claimed moments later by a heavy-set white man named Gerald, who smelled faintly of cologne and immediately fell asleep before the doors even closed. Aaliyah pressed her nose to the window and watched the ground crew move around the plane. She narrated everything she saw in a running whisper that Jasmine found equal parts exhausting and completely wonderful. The engine started. Aaliyah grabbed her mother's hand. The plane began to roll. "Mama, I know. My stomach feels weird. That's normal." "How do you know?" "Because mine does too. Every single time." Aaliyah looked at her mother. "You've been on planes before and your stomach still does that?" "Every time." Aaliyah seemed to find this deeply comforting. She squeezed Jasmine's hand tighter as the plane accelerated down the runway, and then they were up, and Aaliyah let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a laugh as the city of New York tilted and shrank beneath them. Buildings became boxes. Streets became lines. The East River looked like a strip of silver foil. "Mama, Mama, look!" "I see it, baby. It looks like a map." "It does. It looks like my map project from 3rd grade. Better than your map project from 3rd grade. Way better, Aaliyah agreed. For the first 20 minutes of the flight, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Jasmine pulled out her novel. Aaliyah drew in her sketchbook, filling page after page with aerial views of what she imagined the country looked like below the clouds. Gerald snored with the commitment of a man at total peace with the world. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this exact routine thousands of times. One of those flight attendants was Carla Barnes. Carla was 51 years old and had been working for transnational airlines for 23 years. She was good at her job in the way that a machine is good at a job. Efficient, fast, precise. She knew the beverage cart layout in her sleep. She could recite the safety protocols without thinking. She knew how to smile at first-class passengers and make it reach her eyes. But somewhere in those 23 years, something in her had curdled. Her colleagues knew it. Some of them called her difficult. Others, the ones who had been around long enough to say what they actually meant, called her something else. The word they used in the break room when they thought no one was listening was hostile. Specifically, hostile towards certain kinds of passengers. The kind of passengers who were young, the kind who were loud, the kind who looked like they might ask too many questions or take up too much space. Carla moved through economy cabin like she owned it, which, in her mind, she did. The first time she passed row 22, she glanced at Aaliyah and her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Aaliyah didn't notice. She was too busy drawing a whale mid-flight, which she had decided made perfect artistic sense, even if it did not make scientific sense. Jasmine noticed. She noticed the glance the way she noticed all the glances. She filed it under background noise and went back to her book. The second time Carla passed row 22, Aaliyah had her headphones on and was humming softly to herself. Not loudly, not disruptively. The kind of humming a child does when she is completely absorbed and happy and has temporarily forgotten that other people exist. Carla stopped. She stood at the end of the row and stared. Then she moved on without saying anything. The third time, Aaliyah had pulled out her bag of flamin' hot Cheetos. Jasmine had already told her no, twice. But 9-year-olds have their own relationship with instructions, and Aaliyah had decided that the no had an expiration date, and that expiration date was now. She opened the bag with the careful, guilty slowness of a child who knows she is doing something wrong and is hoping the universe will not notice. The universe noticed. "Excuse me." Carla's voice landed on the row like something dropped from a height. Aaliyah froze. Jasmine looked up. "You cannot have outside food on this aircraft," Carla said. Her eyes were on Aaliyah. Not on Jasmine, on Aaliyah. Jasmine set down her book. "I'm sorry, I don't think I've seen that policy before. Can you point me to—" "I'm not talking to you," Carla said. She was still looking at Aaliyah. "I'm talking to her." The sentence landed in the air between them like something that needed to be identified before it could be dealt with. Jasmine processed it slowly. She had heard that tone before. She had felt the shape of it before. The specific brand of dismissal that came wrapped in professional courtesy, just professional enough to deny, just hostile enough to make you feel it in your bones. "She's 9, Jasmine said. Her voice was steady. "You can talk to me." Carla finally shifted her eyes to Jasmine. "Can she follow airline policy?" "I was just asking about the policy. There are signs posted, clearly." Carla reached over and without asking, without a word of warning, took the bag of Cheetos directly from Aaliyah's hand. Aaliyah pulled her hand back in shock. Her eyes went wide. She looked at her mother. Jasmine's background noise spiked to a roar. She kept her voice calm. That's my daughter's property. You didn't have to snatch it. I didn't snatch anything. Carla tucked the bag under her arm. If there's a problem, I can call the senior flight attendant. Please do, Jasmine said. I'd actually love that. Carla looked at her for a long moment with the particular expression of someone who has not expected to be challenged and does not know how to process it gracefully. Then she turned and walked up the aisle. Jasmine watched her go. Her heart was beating fast. She turned to Aaliyah. You okay? Aaliyah was staring down at her sketchbook. She didn't have to grab it like that, she said quietly. No, Jasmine said. She didn't. Are you okay? I didn't do anything wrong. I know, baby. I was just eating. I know. Aaliyah picked up her pencil and started drawing again. But the whale on the page looked different now. Its expression had changed. Jasmine noticed, and something in her chest ached. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Carla did not come back. The senior flight attendant did not appear. Gerald woke up briefly, asked for a ginger ale, got it, and went back to sleep. Jasmine told herself it was over, that it had been what it had been, unpleasant and familiar, and over. She was wrong. It was the 45-minute mark when it escalated again. Aaliyah had needed to use the restroom. Jasmine had walked her up the aisle to the small lavatory near row 16. They waited their turn. Aaliyah went in. Jasmine stood outside, and that is when Carla appeared again. She came from the galley at the front of the plane. She walked toward Jasmine with a speed that had a purpose to it. Behind her, like a shadow, was another flight attendant, younger, a woman named Dana, who later told investigators she had tried to slow Carla down, and Carla had not slowed down. Ma'am, Carla said, stopping close enough that Jasmine instinctively stepped back. Your daughter was seen going through the overhead bins. Jasmine blinked. What? Before she went to the restroom, your daughter was observed reaching into an overhead bin that does not belong to your row. That's not true, Jasmine said. I was with her the entire time. I have a witness. Who? That's not your concern. It absolutely is my concern. You're accusing my child of something she didn't do. Carla's voice dropped a degree in temperature. I'm going to need you to calm down. I am calm. I'm asking you a reasonable question, and you're not answering it. I'm going to ask you one more time to lower your voice. My voice is completely level. I'd like to speak with the pilot or the senior attendant or anyone who is actually going to. The lavatory door opened and Aaliyah stepped out, stopping short when she saw her mother's face and Carla's face and whatever was vibrating in the air between them. Mama? It's okay, Jasmine said. Come here. But Carla turned to Aaliyah before Jasmine could finish the sentence. Did you touch the overhead bins on your way to the restroom? Aaliyah looked up at her. No. Someone saw you. I didn't touch anything. Aaliyah's voice was small, but firm. I walked straight here. Why would someone lie about that? Carla, it was Dana, the other attendant, her voice low and careful. Maybe we should... Were you looking for something? Did you think something in there belonged to you? Aaliyah's face changed. The confusion on it deepened into something that looked to Jasmine like the very first moment a child begins to understand that the world can be cruel in a very specific direction. No, she said. I wasn't looking for anything. I just had to go to the bathroom. I'm going to need to see your backpack. Jasmine stepped forward. You are not searching my child. This is a security matter. This is harassment, and I need you to step back. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, I am authorized to have this flight diverted. Then divert it. Jasmine's voice cracked at the edges, not with weakness, but with the kind of fury that has been held in so long, it starts to shake the container. Divert it, and let's let everyone here talk about why. Go ahead. Carla stared at her. The aisle around them had grown quiet. Passengers in nearby rows had their eyes fixed on the confrontation, with the careful attention of people who are trying to decide whether to speak. A man in row 18 had his phone halfway up. A woman in row 20 was gripping her armrest. And then Carla did something that no one in that aisle expected. She reached out and grabbed Aaliyah by the arm, not gently, not as a gesture, with her full hand, fingers closing around the child's upper arm like she had the right to touch her, like she had the right to move her, like the child's body was something that belonged to the aircraft rather than to the 9-year-old girl living inside it. Aaliyah cried out, Mama, let go of my daughter. Jasmine's voice was not loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the voice of a woman who has passed through fury and come out somewhere else entirely. Let go of her. Right now. Carla's grip tightened. She needs to come with me to... You do not have the right to put your hands on my child. Jasmine stepped into Carla's space. You take your hand off her right now, or I promise you that everyone on this plane is going to know exactly what is happening here. The word everyone went through the cabin like a frequency. More phones came up. More eyes turned. Carla looked around, and for a fraction of a second, her grip loosened. Aaliyah twisted and pulled back, stumbling as she did. And in the stumble, in the confusion of arms and motion and Carla's reflexive tug to keep hold, the child's face hit the corner of the armrest of row 19. The sound was quiet. That was the worst part. That was the part people would describe later in their testimonies and their social media posts and their sleepless nights afterward. Not a crash, not a boom, just a small, quiet sound, like something fragile being broken. And then the high, clean scream of a child in real pain. Aaliyah's hands went to her face. Blood came through her fingers immediately, bright red and fast, running over her knuckles and dripping onto the blue carpet of the aisle. Jasmine caught her before she fell. She went down to one knee in the aisle, her daughter in her arms, pressing her own sleeve to Aaliyah's face, and she was talking to her, the words coming out quiet and fast and falling over each other. I got you, baby. I got you. I got you. You're okay. You're okay. Look at me. Look at Mama. Mama, it hurts. I know it does. Look at me. Keep looking at me. Why does it hurt so much? You're going to be okay. I promise you. You are going to be okay. Dana, the other attendant, was already on the intercom calling for the medical kit. Passengers were standing in the aisle now. Voices overlapped in a wave. Oh my God! Did she just... That child is bleeding. Someone do something. Carla had not moved. She stood in the aisle above Jasmine and Aaliyah, and later people would describe her face differently. Some said she looked stunned. Some said she looked calculating. Some said she looked like a person trying to rapidly reconstruct the sequence of events into a version she could survive. But what every single person in that part of the cabin agreed on was this. She did not kneel down. She did not reach for the medical kit. She did not say, I'm sorry. She did not say anything at all. Jasmine looked up at her from the floor, blood on her sleeve, her daughter shaking in her arms, and she said very quietly, with a calm that cost her more than anything she had ever spent in her life, You did this. Carla opened her mouth. Don't, Jasmine said. Don't say a single word to me. From somewhere back in the cabin, a man's voice, deep and level, cut through the noise. I'm a medic. Let me through. And from somewhere closer, a woman's voice, sharp and precise as a blade, said, I'm an attorney, and I need everyone in this section to please take note of exactly what just happened here, because every single one of you is a witness. The plane flew on above the clouds, indifferent to the storm inside it, and Aaliyah Miller, 9 years old, explorer by nature, her father's daughter, her mother's whole world, sat in the aisle of Transnational Airlines Flight 2247 with blood on her hands, and her face, and her purple hoodie. And she did not cry anymore. She had gone past crying. She sat very still in her mother's arms, and she stared straight ahead with eyes that were trying to understand something that no child should ever have to understand at 30,000 feet above the earth. Jasmine held her and rocked her and promised her things she was going to spend the rest of her life making sure were true. And somewhere near the front of the plane, in the galley, where the coffee was brewed and the cart was stored and the crew retreated when they needed 30 seconds away from the passengers, Carla Barnes stood with her back against the wall and her arms crossed over her chest, and she said to the one colleague who was still willing to stand near her, She was out of control. I had no choice. You saw it. The colleague, a young man named Marcus who had been with the airline for 8 months, looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at his own hands. Then he looked back up. I saw it, he said. But what Marcus had seen and what Carla needed him to have seen were two entirely different things. And Marcus, standing in that galley with the hum of the engines around him and the memory of a child's scream still moving through his chest, made a decision in that moment that was quiet and internal and would turn out to matter more than either of them knew. He pulled out his personal phone, which was against policy during flights, and he typed a single sentence into his notes application. He dated it with the exact time displayed on the galley clock. He pressed save. Flight 2247 had 2 hours and 14 minutes left before it landed in Los Angeles. A lot can happen in 2 hours and 14 minutes. At 30,000 feet, with no way off and no way to call for help, and a child with a broken nose and a mother with fire in her eyes and a plane full of witnesses, a lot can happen. A lot was about to. Marcus put his phone back in his pocket and straightened up when Carla looked at him. He gave her a small nod, the kind that cost him nothing on the outside and everything on the inside. Then he picked up the medical kit from the overhead storage and walked back toward the aisle without saying another word to her. Carla watched him go. She did not follow. The medical kit landed on the floor next to Jasmine with a soft thud, and the man who had called out from the back of the cabin was already crouching beside them. James Thompson was 56 years old, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of hands that looked like they had done real work for a long time. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic, and then spent 12 years working trauma response in the Chicago City hospital system before his knees finally told him they were done with that pace. He was flying to Los Angeles to see his daughter's baby, his first grandchild, a boy named after his own father. He had been asleep when Aaliyah screamed. He was very much awake now. "My name is James," he said to Jasmine, his voice low and even. "I have medical training. Can I take a look at her?" Jasmine looked at him. She had been holding her daughter so tightly her arms were shaking. She looked at his face, the steadiness in it, the absence of panic, and something in her decided to trust it. "Her nose," Jasmine said. "I think it's broken." "Let me see." He turned gently to Aaliyah. Hey, sweetheart. My name is James. Can you look at me for a second?" Aaliyah turned her face toward him slowly. Her eyes were glassy, but present. Her nose was swelling visibly, already darkening at the bridge, and the blood had soaked through Jasmine's sleeve and spread in a wide stain across the front of Aaliyah's purple hoodie. James looked at the nose, at the angle of it, at the swelling. His expression didn't change. That was intentional. He had learned a long time ago that the face of the person treating you becomes the thing you measure your own fear against. "Okay," he said calmly. "I've got you. You are going to be completely fine." He opened the medical kit and pulled out gauze. "Can you breathe through your mouth for me?" "Just like this," he demonstrated. Aaliyah mimicked him. A shallow breath in, a shallow breath out. "Perfect. You're doing perfect." "It hurts a lot," Aaliyah said. "I know it does. That means you're paying attention. Smart girl." He began to pack the gauze carefully, not roughly, with the practiced gentleness of someone who had done this in far worse conditions, in the dark, in the dirt, with the sound of things Aaliyah Miller would never need to imagine around him. He had held worse together with less. He was going to hold this. "Excuse me." The woman's voice came from the row directly across the aisle, and it arrived with the clipped precision of someone who speaks for a living and knows exactly how much weight each word carries. Rachel Sanchez was 42 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, and currently wearing a blazer over a travel shirt because she had learned years ago that a blazer on an airplane means people take you seriously in ways that a travel shirt alone does not. She was a civil rights attorney out of Washington, D.C., partner at her firm for 3 years, and she was on this particular flight because her firm was handling a discrimination case in Los Angeles, and she had a deposition at 9 the next morning. She had not been asleep when Aaliyah screamed. She had been watching Carla Barnes for the previous 40 minutes. "I need everyone in rows 17 through 26 to please stay exactly where you are," Rachel said, loud enough to carry, but controlled enough not to spike. "Do not move. Do not erase anything on your phones. If you have video, protect it. Do not let anyone pressure you to delete it." She stood up and looked toward the front of the cabin. "And someone needs to get me the name of the senior flight attendant on this aircraft right now." A teenage boy in row 20 raised his hand like he was in school. "I got video, the whole thing. It's all on here." "Don't show it to anyone on this crew," Rachel said. "Put it in your cloud right now. Do it immediately." The boy's thumbs were already moving. A woman in row 23 stood up halfway from her seat. "I saw everything. I was watching the whole time because she came past us twice and something felt wrong. I told my husband something felt wrong." Her husband, a quiet man in a window seat, nodded without speaking, the nod of a person who wishes he had said something sooner and is now trying to decide what to do with that. Dana appeared from the front galley. She was moving fast, her face pale in the way faces go pale when a situation has outrun every piece of training you have. She had the first aid certification. She had the protocol binder. She had absolutely none of the composure she needed. "We have a situation," she started. "Yes," Rachel said, "we do. What is your name?" Dana blinked. "Dana Reyes." "Dana, I need you to contact the pilot and let him know that a passenger, a minor, has sustained a facial injury requiring immediate medical attention, that the injury occurred as a direct result of physical contact initiated by a member of your crew, and that there are multiple witnesses and video documentation of the incident. Can you do that?" Dana looked at her. Then she looked at Aaliyah on the floor with the gauze and the blood, and James Thompson's steady hands. Then she looked back at Rachel. "I need to speak with the senior attendant first." "The senior attendant has not appeared," Rachel said. "The pilot is the ranking authority on this aircraft. Contact him." "I can't just—" "Dana," Rachel's voice dropped 1 degree, which made it somehow more cutting. "A 9-year-old child has a broken nose. She is bleeding on the floor of your aircraft. You can and you will contact the pilot. Right now." Dana turned and went back toward the front. Her walk had changed. Something in her posture had shifted. The tilt of someone who has just crossed an invisible line between one version of a decision and another. Jasmine had not stood up from the floor. She was still on one knee, her daughter's head against her shoulder, one hand pressing gauze to Aaliyah's face while James worked beside her. But her eyes were moving. She was tracking everything. Dana walking away, Rachel standing in the aisle, the passengers with their phones, the teenage boy uploading video to the cloud. She was building something in her mind, a complete picture, and the picture was getting larger and more detailed by the second. "You're a lawyer?" she said to Rachel. Rachel crouched down to her level. "Civil rights, yes." Jasmine looked at her for a moment. "She grabbed my daughter because she thought she could, because she thought no one would do anything." "I know," Rachel said. "She's done this before." "I don't know that. I can't prove it, but I know it." "That's what we're going to find out." Rachel reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small notebook and a pen. Old habit, old tool. She used apps for everything now, but the notebook still showed up every time. "What's your daughter's full name?" "Aaliyah. Aaliyah Rose Miller." "And your name?" "Jasmine. Jasmine Miller." "Okay, Jasmine. I need you to tell me everything, every interaction, from the beginning, every word she said to you or to Aaliyah, everything she touched, everything she took." Jasmine began to talk. Marcus came back from the front galley. He moved past Dana, who was on the intercom, her back to the cabin, her voice low and urgent. He moved past the galley curtain, past the beverage cart parked in the corridor, and he went directly to Rachel Sanchez. He had seen her talking. He had heard her voice carrying down the aisle. He had made another quiet, internal decision. "I need to tell you something," he said. He kept his voice low. His eyes went briefly toward the curtain. "About her. About Carla." Rachel looked at him steadily. "Okay. This isn't the first time. 2 months ago, there was an incident on a flight to Atlanta. A black woman with 2 kids in row 31. Carla got her removed from the flight. The woman said Carla had been aggressive with her kids. Carla said the woman was unruly." Marcus paused. Management sided with Carla. The woman filed a complaint. The complaint got closed. Jasmine's head came up from beside Aaliyah. She had been listening. "Closed how?" Rachel asked. "Settled quietly. I only know because I was on that flight too. I heard what happened. I wrote it down then too. I kept the notes." He reached into his shirt pocket. "I kept all my notes." He handed Rachel a folded piece of paper. She opened it. Her eyes moved across it quickly. Then she looked up at Marcus with an expression that was not quite surprise, but was something close to recognition. The look of a person who has suspected something for a long time and has just been handed the first piece of evidence. "How long have you worked with her?" Rachel asked. 8 months. "How many incidents in 8 months?" Marcus looked at the ceiling briefly. 4 that I saw directly. 2 more I only heard about. Jasmine made a sound that was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when something terrible confirms a suspicion they have carried alone for too long. She knew what she was doing, Jasmine said. Not a question. No one answered. The answer was already in the room. The intercom clicked. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, measured and authoritative, the voice of a man who flies 40,000 pounds of metal through the sky for a living and has learned not to sound alarmed even when he is. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Howard. We've been made aware of a medical situation in the main cabin. We have approximately 1 hour and 50 minutes remaining in our flight. Emergency medical personnel will be available upon landing at LAX. We ask that passengers remain seated and allow the crew to assist. Thank you for your patience." The cabin absorbed his words. Then, from row 24, a man named Gerald, who had slept through the first hour of the flight and woken to find himself in the middle of something he did not fully understand, said loudly and without filtering it through any particular tact, "What in the world did I miss?" The woman next to him, who had witnessed everything, turned to him and said, "A flight attendant broke a little girl's nose." Gerald stared at her. Then he looked toward the aisle where James and Jasmine and Aaliyah still sat on the floor, and his face went through several stages of understanding before landing on something that looked like barely contained fury. The crew did that? One of them, yes. Gerald unbuckled his seatbelt. "Sir," said a voice from the aisle, a different flight attendant, young, uncertain. "Sir, I'm going to need you to remain." "I'm 6'3" and I weigh 240 pounds, Gerald said. Not aggressively, but with the absolute calm of a man stating facts. "And I want to see a child who was hurt by someone who was supposed to protect her. So you can either get out of my way or explain to me, out loud, in front of everyone on this plane, why I cannot do that." The young attendant stepped aside. Gerald made his way up the aisle and crouched down near Aaliyah with the careful awkwardness of a large man trying to make himself small enough not to frighten a hurt child. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, very gently, "Hey, little one. My name's Gerald. I'm sorry I was asleep when I should have been paying attention." Aaliyah looked at him. Something in her face shifted, the smallest softening. Not a smile, nothing that easy, but the particular look a child gets when an adult speaks to them with genuine, uncomplicated regret. "It's okay," she said quietly. "No," Gerald said, "it's not. But you're tough, I can see that." "My dad says I'm the toughest person he knows." "Where's your dad?" "Deployed," Aaliyah said. "He's a Marine." Gerald closed his eyes for just a moment. Then he opened them and looked at Jasmine. "What do you need from me?" Jasmine looked at this man she had never met, this large stranger who had been snoring beside her an hour ago, and she felt something in her throat tighten. "I need people to tell the truth about what happened," she said. "Done," Gerald said. "I'll tell anyone who asks, and anyone who doesn't ask, too." Carla Barnes had not come back out of the galley. This is what people would notice later when they reviewed the timeline, when the journalists wrote the timeline up in their articles and the lawyers put the timeline into their briefs. While a child was bleeding on the floor of her cabin, while a medic packed her nose, while an attorney took witness statements, while passengers stood up one by one and said, "I saw it, and I have video, and I'll testify," Carla Barnes stayed in the forward galley and did not once come back out. But she was not idle. She was on her personal phone. Against policy, just like Marcus, but for a different purpose entirely. She was calling someone whose number she had used before, once after the Atlanta incident, and once before that. The call connected on the second ring. "We have a problem," she said. The voice on the other end was not panicked. It was the voice of someone in a management role who has handled problems before and has a practiced set of tools for handling them. "How bad?" the voice said. "A kid got hurt in the aisle." "Hurt how?" Carla's jaw tightened. "Her nose. She was being difficult and I was trying to—" "Stop," The voice cut her off. Don't tell me what you were trying to do. Tell me what the passengers saw. A pause. They have video. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that is doing a lot of work. How many witnesses? The whole back section of the plane. Another silence. Carla, listen to me very carefully. When that plane lands, you do not say a single word to anyone until a company attorney is present. Not to the police, not to the airport authority, not to the media, not to the other passengers. Nothing. Do you understand me? I understand. And Carla, the voice paused one more time, delete this call. The line went dead. Carla stood in the galley and looked down at her phone. Her hands were completely steady. She had been doing this job for 23 years. She had been in difficult situations before. She had always come out the other side. She pressed delete. What she did not know, what she could not have known standing in that galley with her steady hands and her deleted call history, was that Marcus had come back from the aisle 11 minutes earlier and had been standing just outside the galley curtain when her phone rang. He had not meant to overhear. He had simply been standing there, trying to decide if he should go back in and say something to her or keep his distance. He had heard everything. He went directly back to Rachel Sanchez. She just called someone, he said. His voice was tight now, the steadiness wearing thin. Management, I think, maybe legal. She told them there's video. She told them to wait for an attorney before she talks. She deleted the call. Rachel looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she turned to the teenage boy in row 20. What's your name? Devin. Devin, did you get the full video uploaded? Already up. Cloud and 2 backups. Sent it to my mom, too. Good. Rachel turned back to Marcus. I need you to write down everything you just heard, word for word, right now, while it is fresh. Time, location, everything. And then I need you to be prepared to give a formal statement the moment we land. Marcus nodded. He pulled out his phone. He started typing. Rachel turned to Jasmine. They're going to try to get ahead of this. Jasmine looked at her daughter, who had her eyes closed now, exhausted, her head leaning against James's arm while he monitored her breathing. They always do, Jasmine said. Not this time, Rachel said, and the way she said it was not a prediction. It was a decision that had already been made. Word had moved through the cabin the way word moves in a confined space where people have nothing to do but pay attention. It traveled row by row, whispered across armrests, passed in looks between strangers who had been strangers an hour ago and were not quite strangers anymore. By the time the seatbelt sign dinged on for the 3rd time that flight, there were 14 passengers who had independently decided they were going to tell the truth when asked. Not because anyone organized them, not because Rachel had recruited them, because they had seen a child hit an armrest and bleed onto the floor of an aircraft, and the woman responsible had walked away. And that image had done something to all of them that could not be undone. A retired school teacher named Beverly, 64 years old, row 25, pulled a notepad from her carry-on and began writing her own account longhand, old-fashioned, the date and time at the top of the page, the way she used to ask her students to document things when documentation mattered. Her handwriting was neat and clear, and she underlined certain words twice. A man named Robert, row 19, who worked in corporate compliance and had spent 15 years reviewing incident reports for a Fortune 500 company, was composing a detailed email to his own personal address with everything he had observed, using the airline's Wi-Fi, time-stamped. 2 college students in row 27 had already posted about it. Not video, no faces, just words. But the words were specific, and they were out in the world now, and the world had started reading them. The plane had 1 hour and 31 minutes left in the air. Aaliyah opened her eyes. She had been drifting in that uncomfortable half-sleep that comes after pain, when the body is trying to rest but can't fully commit because something still hurts, and the brain keeps pulling you back from the edge of unconsciousness to make sure the hurting has stopped. It hadn't. But she opened her eyes, and the first thing she focused on was her mother's face. "Mama," she said. "Right here," Jasmine said immediately. "Right here. Are we in trouble?" "No, baby, we're not in any trouble." She kept saying I did something. I didn't do anything. "I know. Everyone knows." Aaliyah was quiet for a moment. Her eyes moved around the aisle, taking in the people, the faces, the woman with the notebook who kept writing, the man who had been asleep and was now sitting on the armrest of his seat, keeping watch, like he had appointed himself to the position. Why are all these people looking at us? Because they care, Jasmine said. About us? About you, yes. Aaliyah processed this slowly. Even though they don't know us? James Thompson looked up from where he sat beside her. That's the thing about people, he said. Sometimes it doesn't take knowing somebody. Sometimes you just see something, and your gut tells you what's right. Aaliyah looked at him. Is my nose really broken? Probably, yeah. Will it be crooked? James smiled, small and genuine. Honestly, hard to tell. Could go either way. My dad is going to be so upset. Any dad worth a thing would be, James said. But you know what else? He's going to see that you held it together, that you didn't fall apart. That matters. Aaliyah's chin trembled once. She got it under control. Jasmine watched her do it and felt something equal parts devastating and fiercely proud move through her chest. I want to call him, Aaliyah said. Can I call my dad? Jasmine's throat tightened. He's deployed, baby. It's not easy to reach him. I know, but can we try? When we land, first thing, I promise. Aaliyah nodded. She closed her eyes again. James kept the gauze in place. Jasmine kept her hand in her daughter's hand. The plane flew on. Dana came back down the aisle. Her face was different now from the version that had appeared 20 minutes ago. Less pale, more resolved, as if the act of contacting the pilot had moved her over some threshold she could not step back over. She stopped at the edge of the cluster of people and looked at Jasmine. The pilot is aware, she said. He's notified LAX. There will be medical staff and law enforcement waiting at the gate. Law enforcement, Jasmine repeated. Yes, ma'am. For who? Dana hesitated for the length of time it takes a person to decide they are going to say the true thing, even though the true thing is complicated. For the incident, she said carefully. For the full incident. Does Carla know they're coming? Another hesitation. I don't know what Carla has been told. Dana. Jasmine's voice was not unkind, but it was direct, the way a woman's voice gets when she has been through enough and has decided she does not have the energy left for anything that is not direct. You were standing right there. You saw what she did. You are going to have to decide before this plane lands which side of this you are on, because there is no middle ground here. A child was hurt. Either you saw it or you didn't. Either you tell the truth or you don't. Dana looked at Aaliyah on the floor. She looked at the blood on Jasmine's sleeve. She looked at Rachel, who was watching her with the patient, unblinking attention of a woman who has spent her career reading the moment when someone decides to do the right thing. I saw it, Dana said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not waver. I saw all of it. Rachel's pen moved. The plane descended slowly toward the west, and somewhere below the clouds, Los Angeles was waiting, and the storm that had been building at 30,000 feet was about to touch down. Dana walked back toward the front of the plane with the particular stride of someone who has just made a decision they cannot unmake. Rachel watched her go and wrote 3 more lines in her notebook. Around her, the cabin had settled into the specific kind of quiet that is not actually quiet at all. It is the sound of people thinking very hard and very fast. The sound of 180 strangers recalibrating everything they thought this Tuesday morning was going to be. James Thompson carefully checked the gauze one more time. The bleeding had slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. He looked at Aaliyah's nose with the clinical detachment of a man who has learned to keep his feelings somewhere separate from his assessment. And what his assessment told him was that the break was real. The swelling was significant, and the sooner she got a proper x-ray, the better. What his feelings told him, he kept to himself. She needs ice, he said to Jasmine, quietly. Jasmine looked up toward the aisle. A flight attendant, not Carla, not Dana, a third one named Theo, who had spent the last 30 minutes trying very hard to be invisible, was standing near the beverage cart, pretending to reorganize cups. Can we get ice? Jasmine called out. Her voice carried. Theo looked up. He looked at Aaliyah. He grabbed the ice immediately. No hesitation. No consultation with anyone. Just grabbed it and brought it over in a cloth napkin and handed it directly to James, and then stood there for a second, like he wanted to say something and couldn't find the right words for it. "I'm sorry," he finally said, not to Jasmine specifically, to the air in front of him, to the general situation. "Are you sorry enough to write a statement?" Rachel asked from across the aisle. Tio looked at her. "Yes," he said. "Yeah, I am." Rachel held out her notebook. "Start from the beginning." Carla Barnes had not moved from the galley in 27 minutes. Carla, who in 23 years of flying had never once let a passenger situation keep her pinned behind a curtain, who prided herself on control, on authority, on the ability to manage any cabin regardless of what was happening in it, was standing behind a curtain because, for the first time in a very long time, she understood that walking out was worse than staying in. The cabin had turned. She had felt it before she heard it. The shift in energy that happens when the weight of a room moves from one side to the other. She had been in difficult situations before. She had always had the airline behind her. The policy binder, the chain of command, the quiet institutional understanding that crew members were given the benefit of the doubt, and passengers, regardless of what they claimed, carried the burden of proof. That system had protected her before. She was banking on it protecting her again. What she had not accounted for was Devon in row 20, with his phone already backed up to the cloud. She had not accounted for Marcus and his notebook. She had not accounted for Rachel Sanchez in a blazer, who spoke like a woman who had argued cases in front of federal judges and found this particular Tuesday relatively manageable by comparison. She had not accounted for the fact that Aaliyah Miller's father was a United States Marine. That last piece of information she did not yet know. She would find out soon enough. Rachel had been working her way methodically through the passengers in the affected rows, speaking to each one quietly, efficiently, with the focused energy of a woman who knows how to build a case from the ground up and knows that the next hour is as important as anything that will happen after. She had 4 written statements. She had the teenager's video backed up in 3 locations. She had Marcus's notes, which were detailed and dated and would hold up in a deposition. She had Dana's verbal statement, which she needed in writing before they landed. And she had something else, something she had not expected, that a retired civil rights investigator named Harold Simmons, 71 years old, row 23B, had pressed into her hand 15 minutes ago. It was a business card. His business card from before he retired, with the federal agency seal on it. "I know people," Harold had said simply, "the right people. And I've been taking notes since before that woman grabbed the child's arm." He held up a small legal pad. Old habit. Rachel had looked at the legal pad. The notes were meticulous. Times, direct quotes, physical descriptions of each action, the kind of documentation that comes from a lifetime of understanding exactly what matters in a court of law. "Are you willing to be a named witness?" she asked. Harold had looked at her with the measured calm of a 71-year-old man who has already decided what he stands for. "Young lady," he said, "I have been waiting 30 years for a moment where I could actually do something instead of just filing a report about it. I am not just willing, I am ready." The pilot's voice came over the intercom again. "Flight crew, please prepare the cabin for initial descent." 1 hour and 8 minutes of flight time remained. The plane had begun its long, slow lean toward the west coast, and the shift in altitude was slight but perceptible, the kind of physical reminder that eventually everything that goes up must answer to the ground. In row 22, Jasmine felt it and tightened her grip on Aaliyah's hand. Aaliyah felt it too. Her eyes opened. "Are we landing?" "Not yet. About an hour." "Is my nose going to look bad?" Jasmine almost laughed. The very human smallness of the question in the middle of everything. That was Aaliyah. That was completely and entirely her daughter. "It's going to be fine." "Mom, I'm 9, not 4. Tell me the truth." Jasmine looked at her daughter's face. The swelling had spread across the bridge of her nose and was beginning to shadow under both eyes. "It looks like you got hit," she said honestly. "Bad?" "Pretty bad." Aaliyah was quiet for a moment. "Daddy is going to lose his mind. Daddy is going to be okay." "No, he's not. He is going to fully lose his mind. He's going to be very angry on your behalf." That's what I said. James Thompson made a small sound that was technically not a laugh, but was in the vicinity of one. Jasmine caught it and felt it crack something open in her chest. The particular relief of an almost laugh in the middle of something terrible, like a single bar of sunlight finding a crack in a wall. The galley curtain moved. Everyone who was facing the front of the cabin saw it at the same moment. The curtain shifted, the way curtains shift when someone on the other side has had their hand on it for a moment and then thought better of it. Then it stilled. Then it shifted again. Rachel had her eyes on it. Marcus had his eyes on it. General, who had relocated himself to a standing position near row 20 with the quiet authority of a very large man who has decided he is not sitting back down, had his eyes on it. The curtain opened. It was not Carla. It was the senior flight attendant, a man named Douglas Park, 53 years old, 26 years with Transnational Airlines, who had been in the forward galley for the entirety of the incident because he had been on a scheduled rest break and had been informed of the situation by Dana exactly 11 minutes after it occurred. Douglas had silver at his temples and the expression of someone who has been handed a situation he did not create and does not want, but cannot give back. He walked down the aisle with a steadiness that was clearly costing him something. He stopped near the cluster around Aaliyah. He looked at the child. He looked at the blood on Jasmine's sleeve. He looked at James Thompson's hands. He looked at Rachel Sanchez with her notebook and her pen and her blazer, and the expression of a woman who has already decided how this ends. He took a breath. "Mrs. Miller," he said to Jasmine, "I'm Douglas Park, senior flight attendant. I want to offer my personal apology for what happened to your daughter today." The cabin went very quiet. Jasmine looked at him. "Your personal apology," she said. "Yes, ma'am. Not the airline's apology." A pause. "I can only speak for myself at this. Does the airline know what happened?" "The pilot has been informed." "I'm not asking about the pilot. I'm asking about the airline, the company, the people who hired Carla Barnes and kept her employed. Do they know what their employee did to my 9-year-old daughter today?" Douglas looked at her. He was a man who had spent 26 years learning how to stay calm. He was calm now, but his calm looked different from Carla's calm. It looked like the calm of a man who is genuinely ashamed. "They will," he said quietly. "I will make sure of it, personally." "See that you do," Rachel said, not looking up from her notebook. Marcus had been standing near the galley entrance when Douglas walked out. He had watched Douglas go down the aisle. And then he had gone back into the galley because there was something he needed to check, something that had been sitting at the back of his mind since he overheard Carla's phone call, a detail that was starting to connect to something larger. He went to the crew communication log. Every flight attendant communication made through the aircraft system was logged, time-stamped, stored. He knew this because he had done his orientation training thoroughly, the way people who are new to a job and nervous about it tend to do. He pulled up the log on the galley terminal, and he looked at the entries from the last 40 minutes. There was a gap. The log showed Dana's intercom call to the pilot. It showed Teo's request for medical supplies. It showed Douglas's own communications from his rest break. What it did not show was any communication from Carla Barnes, not a request for medical assistance, not an incident report, not a crew alert, nothing. In the 43 minutes between the moment Aaliyah hit that armrest and bled onto the carpet and the moment Douglas Park walked out of the galley to apologize, Carla Barnes had not filed a single official report about the incident. Not one. Marcus stared at the screen. Then he pulled out his phone and took a photograph of it. Then he went back to find Rachel Sanchez. She never reported it, he said. He showed her the photograph. 43 minutes. A child was bleeding, and she never filed a single official report. She called whoever she called on her personal phone, and she said nothing on the record. Rachel looked at the photograph. She looked at Marcus. She was managing the narrative, she said. She was betting no one would push back hard enough for it to matter. Rachel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She took out her own phone and photographed Marcus's photograph. Then she looked across the aisle at Harold Simmons, who had been listening, because Harold Simmons had been listening to everything. "Did you get that?" she asked. Harold tapped his legal pad twice. "Good," Rachel said. Jasmine had been quiet for several minutes, the kind of quiet that is not emptiness, but accumulation, the weight of everything building up behind a face that is working very hard to hold. James had noticed it. He had a daughter of his own, 28 now, and he knew the specific look of a parent who is holding it together for their child and is running low on what they are holding it together with. "Hey," he said softly to Jasmine, "you doing okay?" She laughed, short and tight. "Define okay. You haven't fallen apart." "That counts." "I can't fall apart," she said. "She's watching me." James nodded. He understood that completely. The way a parent's composure becomes the container for the child's fear. The way your own terror has to go somewhere smaller, so there is room for theirs. "You're doing great," he said. "I mean that." Jasmine looked at Aaliyah, who had her eyes closed again, not fully asleep, hovering in that in-between place. "She keeps asking about her father," Jasmine said, her voice dropping low. "He's been deployed for 18 months. She talks to him when she can, but the connection is bad, and some weeks there's nothing at all. She carries that. She carries it, and she doesn't complain about it, and she just keeps going." Her voice tightened. She was so happy this morning. She was so happy on that runway. She has never been on a plane before. This was supposed to be the best day. James was quiet for a moment. "It's still going to be one of the most important days of her life," he said, "just not in the way you planned." Jasmine looked at him. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No," he said honestly. "It's supposed to be true." The curtain moved again. This time it opened all the way. Carla Barnes stepped into the cabin. The shift in the air was immediate and physical, the way the temperature of a room changes when something that has been absent returns. People felt it before they saw her. Heads turned. Gerald straightened to his full height. Marcus, who had just returned from Rachel, stopped walking. Rachel's hand tightened on her pen. Carla was wearing her uniform perfectly. Her posture was straight. Her expression was what people who did not know her well might have called composed. People who did know her would have called it armored. She walked down the aisle, not quickly, not slowly, at a pace that said she was still a crew member on a functioning aircraft and she intended to behave like one. She stopped at row 22. She looked at Aaliyah. Aaliyah felt the presence above her and opened her eyes. And for one long, suspended moment, the woman who had put her hands on this child, and the child who had her father's stubbornness and her mother's spine, looked directly at each other. Nobody breathed. "I want to make sure you're being cared for," Carla said. The words came out practiced, measured. The words of someone who has been coached or who has coached herself. James Thompson looked up at her slowly. "She's being cared for," he said. The tone of it was not hostile. It was the tone of a man who was very deliberately keeping hostility out of his voice because he has decided that is the more powerful choice. "Good," Carla said. "Anything else?" Rachel asked from across the aisle. Carla's eyes moved to Rachel. Something passed across her face, brief and contained. "I'm checking on a passenger." "You're a witness to an incident," Rachel said. "Anything you say to this family right now will be relevant to legal proceedings. I'd suggest you consider that carefully." Carla looked at Rachel for a moment, and she looked back at Aaliyah. Then she turned and walked back toward the front of the plane. She made it 6 steps before Aaliyah's voice stopped her. "Why did you do it?" The question was small and clear and utterly without malice. It was the question of a child who genuinely wants to understand and has not yet learned to stop asking. Carla stopped walking. She did not turn around. "Why did you grab me?" Aaliyah said. "I wasn't doing anything." The cabin was so quiet, the engine hum felt loud. Carla stood with her back to row 22 for 3 full seconds. Then she walked to the front of the plane and went behind the curtain and did not come back out again. Devin, in row 20, had been watching the whole exchange with his phone angled slightly upward in the way teenagers hold phones when they are recording something without wanting to look like they are recording something. He lowered it when Carla disappeared behind the curtain. Then he looked at Rachel. "I got that too," he said. Rachel nodded. "Good. Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Is she going to get away with it? Like, actually? Because I've seen stuff like this before, where people do things and then the company says it was a misunderstanding, and nothing happens." Rachel looked at him. He was maybe 17, she estimated. old enough to be cynical, old enough to have already seen enough of the world to know that the right outcome is not always the automatic one. Not this time, she said. How do you know? Because she did this in front of 180 people. Because she did it in the air, which means there is no way off and no way to make the witnesses disappear. Because one of her own colleagues documented it. Because you backed up the video. Because a federal investigator, retired, with 30 years of case experience, has been taking notes since before it happened. She paused. And because the little girl she hurt is a Marine's daughter, and when her father finds out, the sound that is going to come from Fort wherever he is deployed is going to be heard all the way back in the Transnational Airlines boardroom. Devin stared at her. You're kind of terrifying. I've been told that, Rachel said. It's not a complaint. Jasmine's phone buzzed. She had forgot she had it. She had been so entirely inside the capsule of the past 90 minutes that the outside world had ceased to feel real. And then her phone buzzed against her leg, and the outside world came flooding back in. It was a text from her sister Denise. Denise, who was in Inglewood, who was waiting for them, who had made a special dinner and picked up the specific kind of sparkling juice Aaliyah liked because she had asked Jasmine 3 days ago what Aaliyah's favorite thing to drink was. The text said, "Flight shows you're landing in 50 minutes. Can't wait to see my baby niece. Tell her Auntie Dee has something special waiting." Jasmine stared at the screen. Her eyes burned. She had not let herself cry yet, not once, not through any of it. She was not going to cry now. But the text from her sister, the specific smallness of it, the normal human sweetness of an aunt waiting with a favorite drink for a niece she loves, landed on Jasmine with the full weight of everything that should have been today and wasn't. She typed back, "We had an incident on the plane. Aaliyah is okay. I'll explain when we land. She's going to need you." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "What? Calling you." Jasmine typed, "Can't talk right now. She's okay. We're okay. See you soon." She put the phone face down on her knee and looked at her daughter. Aaliyah had fallen into a real sleep now, finally, exhaustion winning over everything else. Her head tipped against James's shoulder, her breathing slow and even. The gauze was holding. The ice had helped with the swelling. She looked smaller asleep. She always did. Jasmine could see, in the sleeping face, the 2-year-old she had been, the 4-year-old, the 6-year-old on the first day of school who had walked in without looking back because she had decided she was ready, and that was that. She had always been like her father that way. Decided. "She's strong," James said quietly, following Jasmine's gaze. "She is," Jasmine said. "She doesn't know yet how strong." Douglas Park came back down the aisle. He was carrying a folded piece of paper. He stopped at row 22 and looked at Jasmine, and then at Rachel, and then he made the decision that his expression had been building toward for the last 20 minutes. "I need to show you something," he said to Rachel. He handed her the paper. Rachel unfolded it. She read it. Her face did not change dramatically, but something in it sharpened. "When was this filed?" she asked. 8 minutes ago, Douglas said, through the official crew system. "What does it say?" Jasmine asked. Rachel looked up. "It's an incident report," she said, "filed by Carla Barnes, 8 minutes ago." She paused. "It says that a passenger, an adult female, became verbally aggressive with crew, and that during the ensuing disturbance, a minor in the party sustained an accidental injury." The silence that followed was different from the silences that had come before it. It was harder. It had edges. "Accidental," Jasmine said. "That's what it says." She waited 43 minutes, and then she filed a report that says my daughter's injury was accidental. Yes. Gerald, who had been standing nearby, said something under his breath that he later apologized for in mixed company. Harold Simmons looked up from his legal pad. 43 minutes, he said. He underlined something twice. That timing is going to matter in court. "It's going to matter before court," Rachel said. She turned to Douglas. "You understand what this is." Douglas looked at her steadily. "I understand that a report was filed that does not accurately reflect what occurred on this aircraft." "Are you willing to say that officially?" A pause that was shorter than the ones that had come before it. "Yes," he said. "I am." Devin's phone lit up. He looked down at it, and his expression changed. Not dramatically, just a quick widening of the eyes and a stillness that replaced the fidgeting that 17-year-olds do when they are nervous. He looked across the aisle at Rachel. He said, "Something's happening." "What kind of something?" "My mom posted the video." Rachel stared at him. "I told you not to. I told her not to post it. I said back it up. I texted her, back it up, don't post it." He showed her the screen. She posted it. Rachel looked at the screen. The video had been up for 11 minutes. It had been shared 1,400 times. She looked at it for a long moment. She was a civil rights attorney. She knew exactly what viral evidence did to a case before it got to a courtroom. She knew the complications. She knew the advantages. She weighed them in the 3 seconds she had to weigh them. "How many views?" she said. 42,000. Another 3 seconds. "Okay," she said. Okay meaning we can't unring that bell, so we work with what we have. She looked at Harold Simmons. "How fast does something like this move?" Harold looked at his watch. He looked at Devon's phone. "At that rate," he said, "by the time you land, it will be on every news network in the country." "The airline is going to know before we touch down," Marcus said from behind her. "They already know," Rachel said. She looked toward the front curtain. "The question is what they do next." What the airline did next was land a phone call in the forward galley 11 minutes later. Marcus did not hear this one. But Douglas Park did, because Douglas Park was in the galley when it came through, and Douglas Park was not the same man he had been 2 hours ago. He answered the call, listened for 45 seconds, and then said 4 words that cost him something and gave him something back at the same time. "I can't do that." The voice on the other end of the call asked him to clarify. "The report that was filed is inaccurate," Douglas said. "I was not on the line when the incident occurred, but I have reviewed witness accounts and crew statements, and the report as filed does not reflect what happened. I will not corroborate it." Another voice, different person. Someone further up the chain brought onto the call fast, which told Douglas that the video was already doing exactly what Harold Simmons said it would do. "Douglas, we need you to understand the situation." "I understand the situation," Douglas said. "A child was physically harmed by a crew member on my flight. I am the senior attendant. I have a responsibility." He paused. "If you want to talk about what I saw and what I know, I will talk to you when we land, with a union representative and an independent attorney present. Until then, I have nothing more to say." He ended the call. He stood in the galley for a moment, alone, the hum of the engines around him, the weight of what he had just done settling over him like something he would need to carry for a while. Then he straightened his uniform, the automatic gesture of a man who has been doing this job for 26 years, and he walked back out into the cabin. Aaliyah woke up again when the captain made the final descent announcement, 40 minutes to landing. She opened her eyes, and the first thing she said was, "Is my dad going to find out through the news?" Jasmine froze. It was the specific fear of a military family, the particular terror of a soldier learning something happened to their child through a screen instead of a phone call. "No," Jasmine said immediately. "We're going to call him the second we land, before anything else." "Promise?" "First thing, I promise." Aaliyah nodded. Then she looked at James, who had not left her side for the better part of 2 hours. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed," he confirmed. "You didn't have to." "No," he said, "I didn't." "Why did you?" James Thompson thought about his grandbaby, born 6 days ago in an Inglewood hospital, a boy named after his father who would grow up in a world that James had a hand in shaping or hadn't, depending on the choices he made on any given, ordinary Tuesday morning. "Because my grandfather told me once," he said, "that the most important thing a man can do is stay put when everything in the room is telling him to look away." Aaliyah considered this seriously. "That's a good thing to be told," she said. "Yeah," James said, "it really is." Rachel looked up from her notebook and surveyed the cabin around her with the systematic sweep of a woman taking inventory. She had 7 written statements. She had the video, now with over 42,000 views and climbing. She had Marcus's notes. She had Harold's legal pad. She had Douglas Park's verbal commitment. She had Theo's statement. She had the crew communication log photograph showing Carla's 43-minute silence. She had Carla's own falsified incident report, which was arguably the single most damaging piece of evidence she had, because it showed not just what Carla had done, but what she had tried to do afterward. She had built cases on less, much less. She looked at Jasmine. "When we land," she said, "do not speak to anyone from the airline without me present. Not a representative, not a gate agent, not anyone in a company uniform. If they approach you, you say, 'My attorney is present, and she will speak for me.' Can you do that?" Jasmine looked at her. "You're going to be my attorney?" "Pro bono," Rachel said simply. "Yes." Jasmine stared at her for a long moment. "Why?" Rachel's expression did not soften exactly. It did something more honest than soft. It became, briefly, completely unguarded. "Because I have a daughter," she said. "She's 12, and I have thought, every single day since she was born, about what I would need someone to do for me if something like this happened to her." She paused. "And because I'm very good at my job." Jasmine nodded slowly. Then she reached out and took Rachel's hand and held it for just a moment. Not long, not dramatically, just the brief, firm grip of one woman telling another that she understands and is grateful and will not forget. The plane began its final descent. Below the clouds, the sprawl of Los Angeles came into view through the windows, and the passengers who were looking could see the thin silver threads of the freeways, the geometry of the city laid out in the afternoon light. Ordinary and indifferent, and completely unaware that Flight 2247 was bringing something down from the sky that was about to land in the middle of all of it, with the weight of everything that had happened at 30,000 feet. In the forward galley, Carla Barnes stood alone. Her arms were crossed, her face was still. Her phone had 12 missed calls from a number she recognized and was not answering. The video had been playing on a loop somewhere in the back of her mind since Marcus had mentioned it. The knowledge of it, the footage existing out in the world beyond any ability of hers to contain it or correct it or reshape it into something survivable. She had been in this job for 23 years. She had always come out the other side. The wheels of Flight 2247 hit the runway at LAX at 2:47 in the afternoon with a jolt that moved through every body on the plane, and the engine screamed with the effort of slowing something that had been moving very fast for a very long time. And outside the windows, the terminal came toward them in a rush, and Jasmine Miller pressed her mouth to the top of her daughter's head and closed her eyes, and Aaliyah Miller held her mother's hand and felt the plane slow and slow and slow and finally stop. And at the gate, visible through the oval windows, the lights were already flashing. The plane stopped moving, and for exactly 3 seconds, nobody did anything. Then the seatbelt sign clicked off, and the cabin erupted into the controlled chaos of 180 people reaching for overhead bins and phones and carry-ons, the ordinary machinery of deplaning. Except nothing about this was ordinary, and everyone on Flight 2247 knew it. Rachel was already on her feet. "Nobody in our section moves until I say so," she said, loud enough to carry through the noise. "I need everyone who gave a statement to stay in their seats until law enforcement boards. Do not let anyone pressure you to exit before you've spoken to police. Do you understand me?" Heads nodded across 5 rows. Beverly with her notepad, Harold with his legal pad, Robert, who had been emailing himself documentation for the past hour, Gerald, who had not sat back down since he stood up and showed no intention of doing so now, Devin, who was watching his phone with wide eyes at the number that kept climbing. "How many views?" Rachel asked him. 1.2 million, Devin said. His voice had gone slightly hollow with the weight of it. Rachel absorbed that without visible reaction. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The jet bridge connected with a clunk, and the forward door opened, and the first person through it was not a gate agent. It was a uniformed LAPD officer, followed by a second, followed by a woman in plain clothes with a badge on her hip and the specific energy of someone who has been briefed in the last 20 minutes and has already formed an opinion. Behind them came 2 paramedics with a collapsible stretcher. The plainclothes officer was Detective Sandra Reyes, no relation to Dana, 44 years old, 15 years on the force, the last 6 in the department's Civil Rights Division. She had watched 37 seconds of the video in the car on the way to the airport and had called her supervisor from the parking structure to say, "This is not an airline customer service matter. This is an assault." And her supervisor had agreed. She moved through the cabin with the focused calm of someone who has walked into chaotic rooms for a living and has learned that the first thing you do is identify who is holding the information. Her eyes went to Rachel immediately, because Rachel was standing in the aisle with a notebook and a pen and the posture of someone who has been waiting for exactly this arrival. "Are you with the family?" Detective Reyes asked. "I'm their attorney," Rachel said. "Rachel Sanchez. I have 7 written witness statements, photographic evidence of the crew communication log showing a 43-minute gap before any official report was filed, video documentation currently circulating publicly with over 1 million views, and a crew member who is prepared to give a formal statement contradicting the incident report filed by the responsible party." She held out the stack of statements. "Where would you like to start?" Detective Reyes looked at her for one beat. "You've been busy," she said. "We had 2 hours," Rachel said. The paramedics reached Aaliyah. James Thompson briefed them with the efficiency of one medical professional speaking to another, the break, the timing, the swelling, the ice, the fact that she had been conscious and responsive throughout. No signs of concussion, but assessment needed. The paramedics listened and nodded, and one of them crouched down to Aaliyah with the same careful gentleness that James had used 2 hours ago. And Aaliyah, who had been through enough that day to have earned the right to be difficult, cooperated with quiet exhaustion. "Hi," the paramedic said. "My name's Chris. Can I take a look at your nose?" "It's broken," Aaliyah said. "Yeah," Chris said. "I think you're right. How's your pain right now, 1 to 10? 7, Aaliyah said. Then, with the particular honesty of a child who has decided that the situation has already been bad enough, that there is no point in being anything other than completely truthful, "Maybe 7.5. "Okay, we're going to take good care of you. We're going to move you off the plane and get you somewhere more comfortable. Is that all right?" Aaliyah looked at her mother. Jasmine nodded. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "Can he come too?" Aaliyah asked. And she meant James, who was standing to the side with his carry-on in his hand and the careful expression of a man preparing to step back now that the professionals had arrived. James looked at Jasmine. Jasmine looked at her daughter. "If he's willing," she said. James set his carry-on back down. "I'm willing," he said. Detective Reyes had moved toward the front of the cabin. She stopped at the galley curtain. She pushed it open without knocking. Carla Barnes was standing with her back against the counter, arms crossed, her personal phone in one hand. Beside her was a man in a business suit who had boarded the plane from the jet bridge, not a passenger, not a crew member, a man who had the specific look of someone dispatched from a corporate office very quickly. He had a company lanyard and a practiced smile, and the energy of a man who has been sent to manage a situation and has arrived to find the situation significantly less manageable than advertised. "Ms. Barnes?" Detective Reyes said. Carla looked at her. The company man stepped forward. "I'm Richard Cho, Vice President of Operations for Transnational Airlines. I'd like to—" "I'm not talking to you right now, Mr. Cho," Detective Reyes said without looking at him. Her eyes stayed on Carla. "Ms. Barnes, I'm Detective Sandra Reyes, LAPD. I need you to come with me." "She's not answering questions without legal counsel present," Richard Cho said. "She's not being asked questions right now," Detective Reyes said. "She's being asked to step off this aircraft." A beat. That part isn't optional. The passengers who had not yet deplaned watched Carla Barnes walk up the aisle toward the exit. Some of them had been waiting specifically for this moment, had stayed in their seats past the point when they could have left, because something in them needed to see it. Beverly, with her notepad, held it against her chest and watched. Harold Simmons stood up as Carla passed and said nothing, but he watched with the eyes of a man who has spent a career waiting for accountability to arrive and knows what it looks like when it finally does. Gerald was standing in the aisle near row 19. He was a large man, and he did not move as Carla approached. He did not block her. He did not touch her. He simply stood there and looked at her, and his face said everything his voice did not. And Carla, who had spent 23 years being the most powerful person in any cabin she walked through, moved around him without meeting his eyes. Devin had his phone up. He was not recording Carla specifically. He was recording the moment. There is a difference, and he understood it. Carla reached the door of the plane. She stepped onto the jet bridge. And then she was gone from the cabin, and the air changed, the way air changes when something heavy has been removed from it. From somewhere in row 27, a woman started clapping. It was not triumphant clapping. It was the slow, exhausted kind, the kind that comes from relief rather than celebration. 2 people joined her, then 4, then most of the remaining cabin, a wave of tired, complicated applause that filled the aircraft and meant something that no single word could have contained. Aaliyah, being lifted carefully onto the stretcher, heard it. She looked at her mother. "What are they clapping for?" she asked. Jasmine looked around at the faces, at Gerald and Beverly and Harold and Devin and Theo and all the strangers who had, in the space of 2 hours and 14 minutes, decided that they were going to be something other than silent. "They're clapping for you," she said. Aaliyah's face did something complicated. "I didn't do anything." "Yes, you did," Jasmine said. "You told the truth. Every single time she asked you. You told the truth and you didn't back down." Aaliyah was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "Dad's gonna hear about this. The whole world is gonna hear about this," Jasmine said. The gate area outside the jet bridge had been cleared by airport security, but the clearing had not held. Word moves faster than crowd control, and what had been a quiet Tuesday afternoon gate at LAX had become something else entirely in the 22 minutes since the video crossed 1 million views. There were cameras, not 1, not 2, at least 7 that Jasmine could count as the stretcher came through the door and into the terminal. News cameras and phone cameras, and the specific, directed urgency of reporters who have been told to get to Gate 42 immediately and have run. Jasmine saw them, and her first instinct was to shield Aaliyah, her body moving in front of the stretcher before her mind had fully processed the decision. Rachel was already beside her. "Don't answer anything," Rachel said quietly. "Keep moving. I'll speak." "Ms. Miller?" A reporter, young, breathless, microphone extended. "Can you tell us what happened on the flight?" Rachel stepped smoothly between Jasmine and the microphone. "Ms. Miller's daughter requires medical attention. We'll be making a statement at the appropriate time." "Is it true a flight attendant physically assaulted your daughter?" "I said we'll make a statement." "The video shows—" "I heard you," Rachel said. Her voice was completely level. "Move back, please." They moved through the terminal with the paramedics clearing a path and Detective Reyes walking alongside and the cameras tracking them. And Jasmine kept her hand on Aaliyah's arm the entire time, her fingers finding the small, warm reality of her daughter's skin and holding onto it like a rope. What she did not know yet, what no one on the plane knew yet, was what was happening simultaneously in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Transnational Airlines corporate headquarters in Dallas, Texas. The conference room had been assembled in 40 minutes, which was itself a kind of record. The CEO, a man named Patrick Greer, 61 years old, who had spent 30 years building the airline into what it was, and who had handled crises before, but not like this, not with a million-view video and climbing, sat at the head of the table and looked at the faces around him with the expression of a man who was calculating very fast and not liking any of the numbers. The head of legal was speaking. The head of PR was speaking. The head of human resources was speaking. They were all speaking at the same time, which was not useful, and Patrick Greer held up his hand and they stopped. "How many views?" he said. "As of 4 minutes ago, 2.7 million, the PR head said. It's been picked up by CNN, ABC, NBC, Fox, and every major social platform. It's the #1 trending topic in the country." Patrick looked at the screen someone had pulled up showing the video. He watched it. He watched it all the way through, and his face, the face of a man who had learned to keep his reactions inside, did something that the people in the room had not seen it do before. "Who knew about her history?" he said. Silence. "Barnes. Who in this company knew about her complaint history before today?" More silence. The kind of silence that is full of things no one wants to be the first to say. The HR head cleared his throat. There were 2 prior settled complaints and 1 internal report from a colleague filed 8 months ago. 8 months ago, Patrick repeated. It was reviewed and what? And closed. Patrick Greer looked at the HR head for a long moment. Get me the person who closed it, he said, and get me legal on the phone with Rachel Sanchez within the hour. He stood up. We are not going to fight this. We are not going to manage this. We are going to do what we should have done 8 months ago, and we are going to do it publicly, and we are going to do it today. He looked around the table. Are we clear? No one spoke. Clear was not the right word for what they were. Stunned was closer. Jasmine was in a private room off the main terminal when her phone rang. She did not recognize the number, but it was a Dallas area code, and something made her answer it. Ms. Miller, the voice said, my name is Patrick Greer. I am the CEO of Transnational Airlines. Jasmine sat very still. Rachel, who was beside her, looked up immediately. Jasmine put the call on speaker without being asked. I am calling, Patrick Greer said, because I want to say to you directly, before any lawyer or spokesperson or press release says anything else, that what happened to your daughter today was wrong. It was wrong, and it was our responsibility, and I am personally sorry. Jasmine said nothing. She was listening. She had learned from years of being a woman who was often talked at and rarely listened to, how to tell the difference between a man saying something because he means it and a man saying something because his PR team told him to. She was listening for which one this was. I want you to know, Patrick continued, that Carla Barnes has been suspended pending a full investigation. I want you to know that the incident report she filed has been flagged and will not be used in any proceeding. And I want you to know that this company is going to be fully cooperative with law enforcement and with your attorney. A pause. I also want you to know that I have a granddaughter. She's 7 years old, and I watched that video, and I want you to know what I felt when I watched it. What did you feel? Jasmine said. Her voice was quiet. Ashamed, Patrick Greer said, of my company, of the systems we let go unexamined, of the complaints we closed when we should have acted. Another pause. That doesn't fix today. I know that. But I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard anything else. Jasmine looked at Rachel. Rachel was writing. Her face gave nothing away, but her pen was moving fast. Mr. Greer, Jasmine said, my daughter is 9 years old. She has a broken nose. She's in a terminal in Los Angeles waiting to be taken to a hospital, and she keeps asking me if her father is going to hear about this through the news. He's deployed. He's a Marine. And I can't reach him to tell him myself before the world tells him for me. Her voice stayed steady. It cost her everything to keep it there. So I appreciate your call. I appreciate your apology. But I need you to understand something. This is not going to be managed. This is not going to be settled quietly and closed. My daughter is not a complaint that gets filed and forgotten. Are we clear on that? The silence on Patrick Greer's end lasted 4 seconds. Yes, Ms. Miller, he said. We are very clear. Rachel ended the call on Jasmine's behalf and immediately made her own call. She reached her firm's senior partner in Washington, D.C. in under a minute, because Rachel Sanchez was the kind of person whose calls get answered quickly. I need the full team, she said. Flight incident, Transnational Airlines, LAX. I've got the victim, 7 witness statements, crew documentation, a falsified incident report, a pattern of prior complaints, and a video with 3 million views. The CEO just called the victim directly, which is either a genuine apology or the most expensive PR mistake I've seen this year. She paused. Either way, we're filing by Friday. While Rachel was on her call, James Thompson was on his own phone in the corner of the room, speaking quietly to his daughter in Inglewood. His grandbaby was 6 days old, and his daughter kept asking when he was coming, and he kept saying, soon, baby, soon. I just need a little more time. His daughter had seen the video. Everyone had seen the video. You were on that plane, his daughter said. I was. You stayed with her, the little girl? I did. His daughter was quiet for a moment. Daddy, she said. Her voice was tight in the way voices get when a feeling is trying to come through a space that is too small for it. I'm so glad you're you. James Thompson, combat medic, trauma responder, grandfather of 6 days, pressed his hand over his eyes in the corner of a terminal room in Los Angeles and breathed through it. "Me too, baby," he said. "Me too." Denise arrived. She came through the door of the private room at a near run. Jasmine's sister, 31 years old, with Jasmine's same eyes and a faster temper, and a way of filling a room that had always made Jasmine feel both exhausted and completely safe. She saw Jasmine first and went directly to her, arms out, and Jasmine, who had held herself together through every single minute of the past 3 hours, made a sound when her sister's arms went around her that she had not made once through all of it. Small and broken and entirely human. "I saw the video," Denise said into her sister's hair. "I saw the whole thing. I've been watching it on the train and I couldn't—" Her voice broke. "Is she okay? Where is she?" "She's with the paramedics, right through there." Denise pulled back and looked at her sister's face. Jasmine's eyes were dry, but everything around them was not. "You held it together," Denise said. "I had to. You always have to." Denise's voice had something fierce and sad in it in equal measure. "You always have to." Then Denise went through the door to where Aaliyah was, and the sound that came through the wall after that, Aaliyah's voice calling Auntie Dee with sudden, sharp relief, was the first sound that had come out of that child's mouth all day that sounded like a child instead of someone trying very hard to be brave. Jasmine sat down. Rachel sat beside her. "You need to eat something," Rachel said. "I need to call my husband. That first, then eat." "I don't know how to tell him." Rachel looked at her. "You tell him the truth, the same way your daughter did every single time she was asked." The call to the base went through a military liaison number that Jasmine had memorized months ago and used 3 times in 18 months, each time with the specific fear that the person who answered would not say what she needed them to say. The liaison answered. Jasmine gave her name and her husband's name and his unit. The liaison put her on hold. She sat in the plastic chair in the terminal room with Rachel beside her and Denise through the wall with Aaliyah and Gerald standing outside the door because he had simply not left, had followed them off the plane and through the terminal and had stood outside this room for the past 20 minutes like a man who has appointed himself to a post and is not leaving until the shift is over. The hold music was something generic and slightly too cheerful. Jasmine stared at the wall and waited. And then the line clicked and a voice came through that she knew better than she knew almost anything in the world. Jazz. Her name. Just her name in his voice, and she fell apart for exactly 30 seconds. She let herself have those 30 seconds. Then she pulled herself back. Marcus. Not Marcus the flight attendant, her husband. Staff Sergeant Marcus Miller, United States Marine Corps, currently stationed 11 time zones away. "I need to tell you something before you see it somewhere else." She heard him sit down. She heard the particular quality of silence that a soldier produces when they are preparing to receive news. "Tell me," he said. She told him. All of it. She did not soften it, and she did not rush it, and she did not leave anything out, because that was the agreement they had made with each other the day he deployed, that they would always tell each other the complete truth, regardless of how much it hurt, because the hurt of truth was survivable in a way that the hurt of finding out you were protected from it was not. He was quiet through most of it. She could hear his breathing. She could hear at one point a sound that he tried to suppress and that she pretended she did not hear, because they both needed her to pretend that. "She's okay," he said when she finished. "She's okay. Broken nose. She's going to the hospital as soon as we're done here. Let me talk to her." Jasmine went through the door. Denise looked up. Aaliyah was lying on a padded bench with an ice pack and her headphones around her neck, and she looked up at her mother's face and read it immediately. "Is that Dad?" Jasmine held out the phone. Aaliyah took it and put it to her ear and said, "Daddy." And then Staff Sergeant Marcus Miller, who had survived 2 combat deployments and 100 things that would have broken most people, said his daughter's name in a voice that was entirely undone and entirely present at the same time. The video crossed 5 million views while Aaliyah was talking to her father. Devon sent Rachel a text from the gate area where he was waiting with his own parents, who had arrived to pick him up and had spent 10 minutes alternately proud of him and deeply alarmed by the situation. The text said, 5 million. CNN is saying transnational stock dropped 4% in after-hours trading. Rachel showed it to Harold Simmons, who had also remained, who had not gone anywhere, who had the patient permanence of a man who has been in this business long enough to know that the most important moments often happen in the spaces between the dramatic ones. 4%, Harold said. In 40 minutes, Rachel said. Harold looked at the text for a long moment. You know what this is now, he said. This isn't just an assault case. No, Rachel agreed. It's a systemic case. The Atlanta incident. I've already got someone pulling it. If Carla Barnes did this before and the airline settled it quietly, and then the same airline kept her flying, then this isn't one employee who went wrong. This is a company that knew and made a calculation. She paused. And that calculation just cost them 4% of their stock price in 40 minutes. Harold nodded slowly. The prior victim, he said. The woman from Atlanta. Do you have her name? Not yet. Find her, Harold said. Because she matters. Not just to the case. She matters because she was alone when it happened to her, and nobody stayed, and nobody filed the right report, and the complaint got closed. And she probably spent the last 2 months thinking that was the end of it. He looked at Rachel steadily. It wasn't the end. Today is why it wasn't the end. Rachel looked at him. I'll find her, she said. Jasmine came back into the main room and handed Rachel her phone. He wants to talk to you, she said. Rachel took the phone. Staff Sergeant Miller? Yes. His voice was controlled now, the control of a man who has learned to function inside emotion rather than setting it aside. I need to know what my family needs, what Jasmine needs, what Aaliyah needs. I'm not there. Tell me what they need. Right now, they need medical care for Aaliyah, which is in progress. They need legal representation, which I am providing. They need to know that what happened today is being documented completely and that the person responsible is not going to disappear behind a corporate structure. She paused. I want you to know that there were people on that plane who did not look away. A medic named James Thompson stayed with your daughter for 2 hours. A retired federal investigator named Harold Simmons documented everything. A 17-year-old kid backed up the video before anyone could touch it. Your daughter was not alone. A long silence on the other end. Tell them, Staff Sergeant Miller said. Tell all of them. Tell them a Marine says thank you. I'll tell them, Rachel said. She told them. She went to Gerald first because he was closest, standing outside the door with his arms crossed and his coat still on, looking like a man who has decided this is his post and he is keeping it. She told him what Staff Sergeant Miller had said. Gerald looked at the floor for a moment. His jaw worked. Then he nodded once, the deep nod of a man absorbing something that matters. She told James, who was finally making his way toward the exit with his carry-on, ready now to go meet his grandbaby, having stayed 2 hours longer than his car service had expected. James stopped walking when she told him. He stood very still for a moment. Then he said quietly, You make sure that little girl knows her dad is proud of her. That matters more than anything else right now. She told Harold, who received it with the quiet dignity of a man who already knew, but needed to hear it said out loud. He closed his legal pad. He looked at Rachel and said, This is what the work is for, right here. This is exactly what it's for. She told Devon through a text because he had finally gone to his parents' car. He texted back a single line, Tell her I had her back, and tell her she was brave. The last thing that happened before Jasmine and Aaliyah left the terminal for the hospital was something that no one had planned and no one could have orchestrated. The gate agent, a transnational airlines employee named Patricia, who had been watching everything from behind her desk for the past 40 minutes, walked across the gate area toward Jasmine. She was in her 60s, a black woman with silver locks and reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she stopped in front of Jasmine and looked at her with the specific recognition of one person seeing another person clearly. I've worked for this airline for 19 years, Patricia said, and I have heard things and seen things and told myself there was nothing I could do. She paused. I filed a report today, an internal report, about what I've heard, about what I know, Her voice was steady, but her hands were not entirely still. "I don't know if it matters, but I needed you to know someone on the inside is saying something." Jasmine looked at her for a long moment. "It matters," she said. Patricia nodded. She looked at Aaliyah on the stretcher. "Baby," she said gently, "you did nothing wrong. You hear me? Not one single thing." Aaliyah looked at her. "I know," she said. And the way she said it was different from the way she had said the same thing on the plane 3 hours ago, confused and scared and bleeding. It was not defensive now. It was not small. It was the voice of a child who has been through something that was meant to diminish her and has come out the other side of it, knowing her own worth more completely than she did before. "I know," Aaliyah said again. "I never did." Patricia stepped back. The paramedics moved the stretcher toward the exit. Jasmine walked beside her daughter with her hand on her arm, and Denise walked on the other side, and Rachel walked behind them with her notebook and her blazer and 7 witness statements and a case that was going to be something much larger than a case. And outside the terminal, the Los Angeles afternoon was waiting, and the cameras were waiting, and the 5 million view video was still climbing. And somewhere 11 time zones away, a Marine was sitting with his phone in his hand and a rage in his chest, and a love so large it had no edges. And the name of transnational airlines was on every screen in the country. The automatic doors opened. The air outside was warm and bright. Aaliyah turned her face toward it, and for one moment, just one, she looked exactly like what she was, a 9-year-old girl in a purple hoodie with a gold word on the chest, heading out into a city she had never seen before on the worst day she had ever had, with her mother's hand on her arm and the whole world suddenly paying attention. The hospital was Cedars-Sinai, 12 minutes from the airport, and Jasmine counted every one of those minutes, with her hand on Aaliyah's arm and her eyes fixed on her daughter's face with the specific intensity of a mother who has been scared for 4 hours and has not yet found the place where the fear stops. The X-ray confirmed what James Thompson had assessed at 30,000 feet. Clean break across the nasal bridge. No septal deviation severe enough for immediate surgical intervention. The attending physician, a calm woman named Dr. Okafor, who had the unhurried confidence of someone who has seen everything and has decided that panic is not a useful medical tool, explained that Aaliyah would need to be monitored, would need pain management, and would likely require a follow-up procedure in the next 2 to 3 weeks once the initial swelling resolved. "Is she going to be okay?" Jasmine asked. "She's going to be completely fine," Dr. Okafor said. "She's tough." "Everyone keeps saying that," Aaliyah said from the exam table. "Because it keeps being true," Dr. Okafor said. Aaliyah considered this. "I want a mirror," she said. Jasmine and Dr. Okafor exchanged a look. "Why?" Jasmine asked. "Because I want to see what I look like." Aaliyah's voice was matter-of-fact. "I want to see what happened to me. I don't want it to be a secret in my own face." Dr. Okafor handed her a small mirror without hesitation. Aaliyah held it up. She looked at herself for a long moment, at the swelling, the bruising spreading under both eyes, the slight deviation that was already visible at the bridge. Her expression did not crumble. It tightened once, then released, the way a person's face moves when they are accepting something rather than fighting it. "Okay," she said. She handed the mirror back. "Okay," Jasmine said. "I look like I survived something," Aaliyah said. "That's what Dad always says about his scars. He says they're proof you were there and you got through it." Jasmine's throat closed entirely. She nodded and said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that, nothing that would add to it or improve it. It was already complete. Rachel was in the hospital waiting room with her phone pressed to her ear and her notebook open on her knee, and the expression of a woman running 4 simultaneous tracks in her mind and keeping them all moving. Her firm's senior partner had pulled the Atlanta file. It had taken less time than expected because the woman from Atlanta, whose name was Corinne Washington, 41 years old, a physical therapist from Decatur, had never actually stopped fighting. She had accepted the settlement, but she had also, on her own, without an attorney, filed a separate complaint with the Department of Transportation that had been sitting in a bureaucratic queue for 11 weeks. It had not been acted on. Until today. The DOT contact Rachel's firm had reached in the last hour had used the specific language of a government official who is aware that a situation has become nationally visible and has decided to get in front of it rather than behind it. Words like expedited review. Words like systemic pattern. Words like we have been monitoring this carrier. Rachel wrote all of it down. She wrote quickly in the shorthand she had developed over 15 years of taking notes in moments that moved faster than complete sentences could follow. Then she called Corinne Washington. The phone rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice answered, cautious and tired, in the way voices get when they have been through something that is not fully resolved. Ms. Washington, Rachel said, my name is Rachel Sanchez. I'm a civil rights attorney. I believe you know why I'm calling. A pause. The little girl, Corinne said, on the plane. Yes. Another pause. When Corinne spoke again, her voice was different, still tired, but something underneath the tired had shifted. I saw the video this morning. I've been sitting here for 6 hours. I didn't know what to do. She paused. It was the same. What she did to that child. It was the exact same thing she did to my kids on that flight. Except mine were 5 and 7, and they didn't end up with broken bones. And they told me it was my word against hers. And they gave me a check, and they made me sign something. And I signed it, because I didn't have a Rachel Sanchez. Rachel closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. You have one now, she said, if you want her. The silence that followed was the kind that has a decision inside it. Yes, Corinne Washington said. Yes, I want her. Harold Simmons had not gone home. He had called his wife from the airport, explained what was happening with the practiced conciseness of a man who has called his wife from unusual locations for 30 years to explain what was happening, and she had said what she always said, which was, do what you need to do, and be careful, and call me when it's done. He was sitting in the hospital waiting room beside Rachel with his legal pad, adding to his notes, cross-referencing what he had written on the plane with what he had learned in the terminal, building the kind of documentation that he had learned over a 30-year career in federal civil rights investigation was the difference between a case that held and a case that collapsed. He looked up when Rachel finished the call with Corinne Washington. Atlanta victim, he said. Same attendant, same pattern, same airline response. Harold nodded slowly. He picked up his pen. 12th case I've seen in 30 years that started with one incident and turned out to be a pattern the company already knew about. He wrote something down. You know what the companies always say when it gets to this point? That it was an isolated incident, Rachel said. That it was an isolated incident, Harold confirmed. And you know what the evidence always shows? That it never was. Harold looked at her. You're going to be good at this for a long time, he said. I know, Rachel said. Detective Sandra Reyes arrived at the hospital at 6:47 in the evening. She had spent the intervening hours at the airport, processing the scene, collecting crew statements, reviewing the communication log that Marcus had photographed, and sitting in a small room with Carla Barnes and Carla's hastily assembled attorney, a man who had taken the case on behalf of the airline's legal team and who had spent most of the interview instructing his client not to answer questions. Carla had answered 4 questions. One of them was her name. The other 3 were variations of, I don't recall the sequence of events as you're describing it, delivered in the measured tone of a woman who has prepared those words and is committed to them. Detective Reyes had the video. She had 7 witness statements. She had Marcus's notes and Harold's legal pad documentation and Douglas Park's formal statement and Dana's written account. She had the falsified incident report and the 43-minute gap in the crew communication log. She had the photograph of the communication log timestamp. Carla's attorney had looked at all of it and had asked for 30 minutes alone with his client and had emerged looking like a man who had just been shown a bill he cannot pay. Detective Reyes went directly to Rachel in the waiting room. She sat down. She looked at Rachel's notebook, at the organized stack of statements, at Harold beside her. Then she looked at Rachel and said, simply, she's being charged tonight. Rachel did not react visibly. This was not surprise. This was confirmation of what the evidence had already made inevitable. What charges? Assault causing bodily injury to a minor. We're looking at additional charges depending on what comes out of the communication log investigation. She paused. The DOT has also opened a formal inquiry into Transnational Airlines' handling of prior complaints. That's separate from our case, but it's moving. It's connected, Harold said. Agreed, Detective Reyes said. Jasmine did not know any of this yet. She was in Aaliyah's hospital room, sitting in the chair beside the bed, watching her daughter sleep a real sleep, not the half-sleep on the plain floor, not the exhausted hovering of a child in pain, but genuine, deep sleep. The sleep that comes after the body has spent everything it had and finally been given somewhere safe enough to let go. Denise had gone to get food. The room was quiet. The monitors beeped at the slow, steady rhythm of a child who is fine, who is going to be fine. And Jasmine sat in the chair and let the silence land on her for the first time all day. She thought about the morning, the gate at JFK, Aaliyah's face when the plane lifted off the runway, that gasping laugh, that sound of pure, uncomplicated joy. She had been so happy. And then the hours that followed, all of it. The escalating weight of it, and Jasmine thought about how many times today she had held herself together by deciding that falling apart was not an option available to her because her daughter needed her to be standing. She thought about how many times in her life she had made that same decision, how many times she had absorbed something that should not have been hers to absorb and kept moving because moving was survival, and survival was the only choice on the table. She was so tired. She put her face in her hands and she let herself be tired, in the quiet hospital room with her daughter sleeping 5 feet away, and she stayed there for a while. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. It said, "My name is Corinne Washington. I was on a transnational flight to Atlanta 2 months ago. I know what Carla Barnes does. I know what it feels like. I just want you to know that your daughter's courage gave me mine back. I found an attorney tonight. We're not done." Jasmine read it twice. Then she set the phone face down on her knee and looked at the ceiling and breathed. Then she picked the phone back up and typed, "Thank you. We're going to do this together." The press conference happened the next morning. It was not planned. It was not something Rachel had scheduled or that the hospital had organized or that anyone had orchestrated in advance. It happened because at 9:15 in the morning, 48 hours and 2 time zones away from where it all began, Patrick Greer, CEO of Transnational Airlines, walked up to a podium in Dallas and said things that no airline CEO had said before in quite this way. He did not read from a prepared statement. He stood at the podium without notes, and he said that Carla Barnes had been terminated, effective immediately. He said that the 2 prior settled complaints against her would be reopened for review. He said that the settlement agreements signed by the prior complainants were being voluntarily voided by the airline, meaning those individuals were free to pursue further legal action. He said that the airline was commissioning an independent investigation into its complaint review process, and that the results of that investigation would be made public. He said that Transnational Airlines was establishing a civil rights oversight position, an external appointment, not an internal one, to review crew conduct complaints going forward. And then he said one more thing. He said that the airline would be covering all of Aaliyah Miller's medical expenses, now and in the future as related to this incident, and that it was setting up an educational trust in her name, not a settlement, not in exchange for releasing claims, simply as an acknowledgement of what had been taken from a 9-year-old girl on a Tuesday morning at 30,000 feet. Rachel watched the press conference on her phone in the hospital waiting room. She watched it all the way through. Then she called her firm. "He voided the prior settlements voluntarily," she said. "We saw," her partner said. "That means Corinne Washington can file independently without fighting the NDA. It means everything just got faster and cleaner. It means he's genuinely scared," Rachel said, "or genuinely ashamed, possibly both. Does it matter which?" Rachel thought about it. For the outcome of the legal case, no. For what it means about whether real change happens, yes, it matters a lot. Jasmine had not watched the press conference yet when Rachel came into Aaliyah's room to tell her about it. She had been watching Aaliyah eat breakfast, which had been its own small celebration, the return of appetite being one of those markers of recovery that matters more than the clinical ones sometimes. Aaliyah was eating scrambled eggs with the focused attention of someone who has not eaten properly in 20 hours and is now making up for it systematically. Denise was beside her, feeding her information about Los Angeles in a running commentary that Aaliyah was absorbing between bites. There's a natural history museum, Denise was saying, has a whole hall about ocean life. Deep sea? Aaliyah asked. Deep as it gets. I want to go. We're going. Week is not over. My nose is broken. Your nose is broken, not your legs. Aaliyah considered this logic and decided it was sound. Rachel stood in the doorway and looked at this for a moment before she spoke. The normalcy of it, the aunt and the niece and the eggs and the plans, the ordinary forward motion of a family that has been hit hard and is already finding its way back to itself. Jasmine, she said, I need to show you something. She played the press conference on her phone. Jasmine watched it standing up, which was how she had spent most of the last 2 days, one hand holding the phone and the other arm crossed over her chest. When it ended, she looked at Rachel. The educational trust, she said, for Aaliyah. Not in exchange for anything, separate from any legal claims. And the prior settlements, he voided them. Yes. Jasmine was quiet for a moment. Corinne Washington can sue. Corinne Washington is filing by the end of the week. Good. Jasmine's voice was even. Good. She looked at the phone screen, at the frozen image of Patrick Greer at the podium. Is it real, what he said? Is it a PR strategy, or is it real? We're going to find out by how hard they fight us, Rachel said. If it's real, they won't fight. They'll cooperate with the investigation, they'll make the oversight position independent and meaningful, and they'll let us depose whoever closed the Atlanta complaint without obstruction. She paused. If it's strategy, they'll smile while they do the opposite of everything he said. Which do you think it is? I think it's both, Rachel said honestly. I think he's ashamed and scared at the same time, and I think we keep the pressure on until the shame outlasts the strategy. Devon texted Rachel at 11 in the morning. The video had crossed 18 million views overnight. It was trending in 14 countries. News networks in the UK, Canada, Australia, and Germany had run it on their morning broadcasts. A member of the United States Senate had issued a statement calling for a congressional review of airline passenger civil rights protections. 2 other members had co-signed the statement by noon. Rachel showed the text to Harold, who was back in the waiting room with his legal pad, having gone home the previous night and returned at 8 in the morning because there was more work to do, and Harold Simmons was not the kind of man who left work unfinished. 14 countries, Harold said. 18 million views, Rachel said. Harold looked at his legal pad. You know who needs to know about that? Aaliyah, Rachel said. Aaliyah, Harold confirmed. They went to her room together. Harold Simmons, 71 years old, retired federal civil rights investigator, stood at the foot of the hospital bed of a 9-year-old girl with a broken nose and a purple hoodie folded on the chair beside her and said, Young lady, I want to tell you something. Aaliyah looked at him. She'd been told about Harold, about who he was and what he had done on the plane, and she looked at him with the particular attention she reserved for people her mother had told her deserved it. There are people in 14 countries today who know your name, Harold said, and they know it because you told the truth when it would have been easier not to. Because you looked that woman in the eye on a plane and you said, I didn't do anything wrong. And you said it every single time she asked. That's not a small thing, he paused. I've been doing this work for 30 years. I have seen a lot of moments. This one matters. You matter, and I wanted you to hear that from someone who has been in this business long enough to know the difference. Aaliyah looked at him for a long moment. Were you scared? She asked. Harold blinked. It was not the response he had expected. Of what? When you were doing your job for 30 years, were you ever scared? Harold thought about this with the seriousness it deserved. Every time, he said. Every single time. But you did it anyway. Every single time. Aaliyah nodded. Me too, she said. I was scared the whole time. I just didn't stop. Harold looked at her. Rachel looked at Harold. Nobody said anything for a moment, because the room had become the kind of room where silence is more appropriate than words. Then Denise said, very quietly from the corner, "I need a minute," and walked out into the hallway and let herself cry for 30 seconds, because someone in the room had to. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Jasmine's phone rang with the military liaison number. She answered immediately. "Is everything okay?" "Ms. Miller, this is Sergeant Chen from the liaison office. We have your husband on the line. There's been a development." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of development?" "A good one, ma'am. Please hold." The line clicked, and then Marcus was there, her husband, and his voice had something in it that she had not heard in 18 months. Something cracked open and urgent. "Jas, they're sending me home." She sat down. "What?" "Emergency family leave. Command approved it this morning. I'm on a flight in 14 hours. His voice was tight with the effort of holding something large in a space that was not large enough. "I'm coming home. I'm going to be there." Jasmine pressed her hand over her mouth. She breathed through her nose. She looked through the open door of the hospital room at Aaliyah, who was drawing in her sketchbook, the colored pencils spread out on the blanket, the deep-sea creatures filling up the page. Aaliyah did not know yet. Jasmine was not going to tell her on the phone. She was going to wait, and she was going to let Aaliyah see his face in person, and she was going to watch her daughter's face when that happened. 14 hours, she said. 14 hours, he said. "I'll be there." "I know you will. You're always there." His voice broke once and recovered. "Jas, I saw the video. I've watched it 40 times. I watched you on that floor with her, and He stopped. "I need you to know that there is not a single day of my life that I am more proud of you than today." Jasmine closed her eyes. The tears came, and she let them. She held it together, Marcus. You would have been so proud of her. I am so proud. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her right now. I want her to know before anything else today." Jasmine stood up. She walked to the door. "Aaliyah," she said. Aaliyah looked up. "I have someone who wants to talk to you." The sound Aaliyah made when she heard her father's voice was the sound the whole day had been building toward. Not the scream of pain in the aisle, not the quiet bravery of a child who kept answering questions and kept telling the truth and kept holding herself together. This was underneath all of that, the thing the bravery had been protecting, the raw and complete love of a girl for her father, a girl who had been carrying his absence like a second backpack for 18 months, and who now, hearing his voice tell her he was coming, put it down. She cried. She really cried. Deeply and completely. The kind of crying that is not weakness, but release. And she talked to her father for 22 minutes, while Jasmine sat beside her, and Denise stood in the doorway, and Rachel and Harold waited in the hall, and the hospital room held all of it without complaint. When Aaliyah finally handed the phone back to her mother, her face was red and wet and exhausted, and more at peace than it had been in 2 days. "He's coming," she said, to no one in particular. "He's coming," Jasmine confirmed. Aaliyah picked up her colored pencils. She looked at the sketchbook. Then she turned to a fresh page and she started drawing. Jasmine watched her draw, watched the image take shape, a plane in the sky, and below it, tiny and precise, a girl standing on the ground looking up, not falling, not hurt, standing, looking up at the sky with her arms slightly out at her sides, the posture of someone who has been through the air and landed. "What's that?" Jasmine asked. "Me," Aaliyah said. "After." The formal lawsuit was filed on Friday morning, 3 days after the flight. Rachel Sanchez, acting as lead counsel, filed on behalf of Jasmine and Aaliyah Miller against Transnational Airlines and Carla Barnes individually. The filing was 47 pages. It included the video, all 7 witness statements, Harold Simmons's documentation, the crew communication log photograph, the falsified incident report, Douglas Park's statement, Dana Reyes's statement, Marcus's crew notes, the evidence of the 43-minute gap, the prior Atlanta complaint and its subsequent improper closure, and a detailed accounting of the systemic pattern of discriminatory conduct that the filing argued had been enabled, perpetuated, and deliberately concealed by Transnational Airlines management structure. The filing made 3 demands. financial damages for Aaliyah Miller, structural reform of the airline's complaint review and crew conduct oversight systems, and the public release of all internal documentation related to prior complaints against Carla Barnes. Within 4 hours of the filing, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a piece on Corinne Washington. She had agreed to be interviewed. She sat in a chair in her living room in Decatur with her hands in her lap, and she said, "I signed that paper because I thought I was alone. I thought nobody saw it. I thought nobody would believe me." She paused. "I am not signing anything this time, and I am not alone." The piece was shared 2 million times by evening. By that same evening, 2 additional women had come forward with accounts of separate incidents involving Carla Barnes on transnational flights. Neither had filed official complaints. Both had stories that followed the same pattern. Both had been afraid to speak. Both had watched 18 million people watch a video of what had been done to a 9-year-old girl and had decided that afraid was not enough of a reason to stay quiet anymore. Rachel got the calls within an hour of each other. She called Harold after the second one. 4 total, she said. Harold was quiet for a moment. "How far back does the oldest one go?" Rachel looked at her notes. 3 years. Another silence. 3 years, Harold said, and the airline closed every complaint. Every one. "That's not negligence," Harold said. "That's policy." "Yes," Rachel said. "That's exactly what it is." James Thompson met his grandbaby that Friday evening, 2 days later than planned, because he had stayed at the hospital Thursday morning when the nurses mentioned, offhandedly, that Aaliyah had been asking about the man who had taken care of her on the plane. He had gone to her room with his carry-on already in hand, ready to finally leave for his daughter's house, and Aaliyah had looked at him from the bed and said, "I never said thank you properly." James had set his carry-on down. "You don't need to thank me. My dad says you always thank people who stayed," Aaliyah said. "He says that's what separates the ones who mean it from the ones who were just passing through." James Thompson looked at this child and thought about the grandbaby he hadn't met yet. 6 days old now. 7 days old now. And he thought about the kind of world that baby was going to grow up in, and whether the people in it were going to be the kind who stayed or the kind who kept walking. And he thought that sitting in this room right now was one small answer to that question. "You're welcome," he said. It was an honor. Aaliyah extended her hand formally, the way a child does when they have been taught that a real thank you involves a handshake. James shook it. His hand completely covered hers. "Tell your grandbaby about today," Aaliyah said. "I will," James said. "Tell him that when something wrong happens in front of you, you stay." "I will tell him exactly that," James said. "Every chance I get." He picked up his carry-on and he left. And he drove to his daughter's house in Inglewood, and he held a 7-day-old boy named after his own father, and he told his daughter every detail of the last 2 days. And his daughter cried through most of it. And when he got to the part about Aaliyah's handshake, his daughter said, "She's going to be something, that kid." "She already is," James said. Staff Sergeant Marcus Miller landed at LAX on Saturday morning. He came through the arrivals door in civilian clothes because he had changed on the layover, wanting to be her father and not a uniform when she first saw him. And he was walking fast, the walk of a man who has been sitting still for 22 hours and needs to move toward something. Jasmine saw him first. She always saw him first. She had always had that instinct, like a compass finding north. She touched Aaliyah's shoulder. Aaliyah turned. And then she was off the chair and across the arrivals hall in a run that was not elegant, not coordinated, just pure velocity. 9 years old and completely certain of her direction. And Marcus caught her and lifted her and held her with the kind of grip that has 18 months and a broken nose and every mile of ocean between them in it. And he pressed his face into her hair, and she pressed her face into his shoulder. And they stayed there for a long time while the arrivals hall moved around them the way the world moves around things that are standing completely still in the middle of it. Jasmine did not cross the hall immediately. She stood and watched them. She let herself watch, let herself have the image, the specific, unrepeatable image of her husband holding her daughter in an airport in Los Angeles on a Saturday morning, 3 days after the worst day of their lives. And she put it somewhere in herself where she keeps the things that matter most. Marcus looked up and saw her over Aaliyah's shoulder. He reached out his arm. She went. 6 weeks later, Carla Barnes was arraigned on charges of assault causing bodily injury to a minor. She pleaded not guilty. Her attorney argued that the incident was an accident resulting from a chaotic situation caused by an uncooperative passenger. The judge set bail and a trial date. Outside the courthouse, one of the reporters asked Rachel Sanchez whether she believed the trial was necessary given the volume of evidence. Rachel looked at the camera. The trial is not just necessary, she said. It's essential, not only for Aaliyah Miller, but for Corinne Washington in Atlanta and for the 2 other women who came forward, and for every person who has ever been on a plane and been told that what happened to them didn't happen, that they were difficult, that they were the problem, that the system would protect the person with the uniform before the person with the truth. She paused. This trial is about making sure that the next time someone in that position thinks they can put their hands on a black child at 30,000 feet and walk away from it, they know. They know with absolute certainty that they cannot. The question that followed was from a different reporter, further back, and it was directed not at Rachel, but at Jasmine, who was standing to her left. Ms. Miller, what do you want people to take away from this? Jasmine looked at the camera. She thought about Aaliyah's face on the plane, confused and scared and bleeding. She thought about Corinne Washington saying, "I signed because I thought I was alone." She thought about Harold Simmons on his legal pad, and Devon uploading to the cloud, and Gerald standing in the aisle, and James Thompson's steady hands. She thought about Patricia at the gate desk, 19 years of watching and finally filing a report. She thought about Dana saying, "I saw it," and meaning it. "Stay," Jasmine said. The reporter waited for more. "When something wrong happens in front of you," Jasmine said, "stay. Don't look away. Don't decide it's not your business. Don't tell yourself someone else will handle it." She paused. A lot of people stayed on that plane, and because they stayed, my daughter knows that the world is not only full of people who will hurt you, it is also full of people who will hold gauze to your face and write down what they saw and stand in the aisle and not move until the right thing happens. She looked directly into the camera. That's what I want people to take away. Stay. 3 months after Flight 2247 landed at LAX, Transnational Airlines announced the appointment of its first external civil rights oversight director, a former DOJ attorney with 20 years of civil rights enforcement experience, whose first act was to commission a full audit of every complaint filed against crew members in the previous decade. The audit found 47 cases that had been improperly closed. 31 of the complainants were people of color. 17 involved the same 2 crew members. Carla Barnes accounted for 9 of them. Rachel filed motions to expand the class action within a week of the audit's release. The case was now not Aaliyah Miller versus Transnational Airlines. It was 31 people in 17 states across a decade of silence who had been told that what happened to them didn't count and who were now, finally, being counted. Corinne Washington was the first co-plaintiff named in the expanded filing. She called Jasmine the night before the filing was announced, and they talked for an hour and a half about things that had nothing to do with law or airlines or civil rights strategy, and everything to do with what it feels like to carry something alone and then find out you don't have to anymore. Aaliyah's nose healed. The procedure went exactly as Dr. Gakiwal, Okafor, had predicted, clean and uncomplicated. And when it was done and the swelling was gone and Aaliyah looked in the mirror the way she had looked in the hospital mirror 3 months earlier, she said, "I look like me again." "You always looked like you," Jasmine said. "I know," Aaliyah said, "but now the outside matches the inside." And Jasmine, who had spent 4 hours on a plane holding herself together, and 2 days in a hospital doing the same, and 3 months after that holding a movement together that was bigger than either of them had planned, looked at her daughter's face, whole and clear and completely itself, and she thought, yes, that's exactly it. The outside matches the inside. That is what we fought for. That is what every witness statement and every backed up video and every person who stayed instead of looking away was fighting for. For a 9-year-old girl to stand in front of a mirror and see herself looking back. Undiminished, unbroken where it counts, entirely, completely, exactly herself. Aaliyah Miller was not a symbol. She was not a movement, or a headline, or a case number, or a turning point in the history of airline passenger rights, though she became all of those things in the months that followed. She was a girl who loved deep-sea creatures and colored pencils and her father's voice and the view from a plane window at 30,000 feet. She was a girl who had been told she was difficult when she was simply present, who had been told she was wrong when she was simply right, who had bled on the carpet of an aircraft and had looked up from the floor with her mother's arms around her and said to a woman who expected her to be afraid, "Why did you do it? I wasn't doing anything." And that question, small and clear and completely without malice, turned out to be the most powerful thing said